The Battle of Antietam, also known as the Battle of Sharpsburg, stands as one of the most significant and bloodiest encounters of the American Civil War. Fought on September 17, 1862, near the town of Sharpsburg, Maryland, and the Antietam Creek, this battle marked a pivotal moment in the conflict between the Union and Confederate forces. Its significance is not merely in the staggering number of casualties it produced, but also in its broader political and military implications, particularly in shaping the course of the war and altering the trajectory of the United States. The context leading up to the Battle of Antietam is rooted in the larger strategic goals of the Confederate States. Following a string of successes in the Eastern Theater, particularly under the command of General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia embarked on an ambitious campaign to invade the North. This move was intended to relieve pressure on war-torn Virginia, garner support for European powers by demonstrating Confederate military prowess, and potentially influence the upcoming midterm elections in the Union, which could lead to a shift in public opinion toward peace negotiations. Lee's decision to carry the war into Union territory reflected his belief that a significant victory on Northern soil might sway the conflict in favor of the Confederacy. As Lee's forces moved northward, Union Major General George B. McClellan, commanding the Army of the Potomac, faced mounting pressure to act decisively. McClellan, known for his cautious and methodical approach, had been criticized by President Abraham Lincoln and others for his reluctance to engage Lee's army aggressively. However, McClellan's fortunes changed when Union forces discovered a lost copy of Lee's Special Order 191, which detailed the Confederate plan of dividing their forces during the Maryland campaign. This intelligence provided McClellan with a rare opportunity to strike Lee's army, while it was vulnerable and dispersed. Despite the advantage of this critical information, McClellan's cautious nature led to delays in his movements, allowing Lee to regroup his forces near Sharpsburg. By September 15, 1862, both armies had assembled on opposite sides of Antietam Creek. The stage was set for what would become the single bloodiest day in American military history. The battle began at dawn on September 17th, with Union forces launching a series of assaults on the Confederate positions. The early morning fighting centered on the Miller cornfield, where Union troops under Major General Joseph Hooker attacked Confederate soldiers commanded by Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson. The fighting in the cornfield was intense and chaotic, with the landscape quickly transforming into a deadly quagmire of smoke, fire, and blood. Neither side was able to gain a decisive advantage, and the cornfield changed hands several times throughout the morning. As the battle raged on, attention shifted to the Sunken Road, later known as Bloody Lane. Union forces under Major General William H. French and Major General Israel B. Richardson launched an assault on the Confederate position held by Major General Daniel Harvey Hill's division. The Sunken Road, a natural trench, provided Confederate soldiers with a strong defensive position, allowing them to repel repeated Union attacks. However, after hours of brutal combat, the Union forces finally broke through the Confederate line, turning the Sunken Road into a scene of horrific carnage, with bodies piled high in the narrow trench. Meanwhile, on the southern end of the battlefield, Union Major General Ambrose Burnside's 9th Corps attempted to cross Antietam Creek at what would become known as Burnside's Bridge. The Confederate forces, commanded by Brigadier General Robert Toombs, were entrenched on the high ground overlooking the bridge, making any crossing a deadly endeavor for the Union troops. For hours, Burnside's men struggled to take the bridge, suffering heavy casualties in the process. Eventually, Union forces succeeded in crossing the creek, but their advance was slowed, giving Lee enough time to bring reinforcements, including troops under Major General A.P. Hill, who arrived for Harper's Ferry just in time to launch a counterattack that pushed Burnside's men back and prevented a complete Union breakthrough. By the end of the day, the battle had reached a bloody stalemate. The Union Army, despite its numerical superiority, had failed to decisively defeat Lee's forces, but it had managed to halt the Confederate invasion of the North. The toll of the battle was staggering, with over 23,000 soldiers killed, wounded, or missing. The carnage at Antietam shocked the nation and underscored the brutal nature of the Civil War. In the immediate aftermath, both sides claimed victory, but the strategic implications favored the Union. Lee's army, though bloodied, was allowed to retreat back into Virginia without significant pursuit from McClellan. This decision by McClellan drew sharp criticism from President Lincoln, who had hoped for a more aggressive follow-up that could have potentially destroyed Lee's army and shortened the war. McClellan's failure to pursue Lee ultimately led to his removal from command later that year. Politically, the Battle of Antietam provided President Lincoln with the opportunity he had been waiting for to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Although the battle was tactically inconclusive, it was enough of a Union victory to justify the proclamation, which Lincoln had drafted earlier but had held back until he could issue it from a position of strength. On September 22, 1862, just 5 days after the battle, Lincoln announced his intention to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in the Confederate States would be freed as of January 1, 1863. This bold move transformed the nature of the Civil War from a conflict to preserve the Union into a war for human liberation, adding a moral imperative to the Union cause and discouraging European powers, particularly Britain and France, from recognizing the Confederacy. The Battle of Antietam also had a profound impact on the soldiers who fought there and on the broader public consciousness. The sheer scale of the casualties shocked both the North and the South, and the images captured by photographer Alexander Gardner brought the grim reality of the battlefield to the home front in a way that had never been seen before. Gardner's photographs, displayed in Matthew Brady's New York Gallery, made the horrors of war tangible for civilians, fueling both support for the war effort and opposition to the ongoing bloodshed. In the broader context of the Civil War, the Battle of Antietam marked a turning point. It ended Lee's first invasion of the North, preserving the Union's territorial integrity at a critical moment. It also set the stage for future Union offensives and contributed to the eventual shift in momentum toward the Union's favor. However, the battle also revealed the limitations of Union leadership at the time, particularly McClellan's hesitance to capitalize on opportunities, which would continue to be a theme until more aggressive commanders, such as Ulysses S. Grant, rose to prominence. In conclusion, the Battle of Antietam was a watershed moment in the American Civil War, not just for its unprecedented bloodshed, but for its far-reaching implications. It was a battle that highlighted the ferocity and human cost of the conflict, while also shaping the political and military landscape in ways that would resonate throughout the remainder of the war. The legacy of Antietam endures as a stark reminder of the sacrifices made and the complex forces that shaped the nation's history during its most turbulent era.